this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big call here.
Marshall thinks they have it, and the Herd do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway, and a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road, and it is an opening touchdown return, and just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right, quick strike, and they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia, and it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. The Herd had a bye week this week, but this coming weekend they'll be bringing in Florida International to the Joan that we just watched last night. This Sunday, by the way, we're recording this preview. Last night I watched, I don't know if Trace did, I watched Western Kentucky play Florida International, and nothing really about FIU seems scary. I know that's probably not the nicest thing to say, but nothing really seemed very scary. They were only able to put up 19 points on the Tops, and the Toppers had an off night. They really could have put a lot more points on the board. They just didn't get the offense going until later, and even then, some things weren't just as crisp as we'd been seeing them throughout the season. They still managed to put up 34 on FIU, and it really wasn't in question. Even when the game was close for a little while, it didn't even seem like the Tops were in danger of ever, losing that game. So FIU is 1-6 on the season, Trace. Not really anything going their way. Their lone win on the season came back in week 1 against a team I never even heard of, Long Island University, which I went and clicked on their profile too, and they're tearing it up this year. They're 1-5 in their own conference, and they've scored a grand total of 45 points in 6 games, and 10 of those came against FIU. The Panthers are already 1-6, like I mentioned, 0-3 in conference. I mean, it's pretty much a wrap for them. They're just trying to see if they can win some games and, maybe spoil some seasons. But I don't know. All time, the Herd owns a 6-2 record against FIU. They've won the last 2 in a row. Last season in 2020, the game did not get played. So somebody was in a COVID protocol and couldn't play the game last year. I don't know who it was. May have been both. Who knows? It was FIU, you say? Yeah. Okay. And FIU is 1-2 all time in Huntington. The game, of course, going down Saturday, October 30th. Trace, the Power Index loves Marshall. I have not. It's been a while since we've seen a Power Index rating this high against a conference opponent. 93.2% chance to win for the Herd in a home game against FIU. Like that, nothing is going right for the Panthers. Before we get into some generalities, find the podcast at MSTD_podcast on Twitter. Of course, anywhere you can pretty much listen to a podcast, you'll find us. So all the major outlets have the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Just search it, subscribe, rate, all that good jazz. And, of course, the Moonshine Throwdown podcast YouTube channel, if that's the way you'd like to consume this content. Trace is with me. Of course, I mentioned FIU coming to town, Trace. What, if anything, scares you about the Panthers?
Well, I mean, they are in Florida, so you would think they would have to have some decent players, but just by default. But based on their record this year and game-by-game results, it doesn't look like they have a whole lot. I mean, Even I've been looking at some of their scores from this year or earlier today, and none of these games are even really close. I mean, they're not even keeping it really competitive against a lot of these teams, and it's not like they're going against world beaters necessarily. And I just don't think FIU seems like a program that's totally lost right now. 2-3 years ago, they were rolling pretty good with Butch Davis. They had a lot right. They had a lot going. Matter of fact, in 2018, if they would have beaten Marshall in the last regular season game of the year, FIU would have been in the conference title game. But they lost to Marshall that year, and that ruined it. And that sent Middle Tennessee to the game instead. So FIU had a nice bit of momentum going, but yeah, I don't know. The last couple of years, it has not been good. And it's more of the same this year. I think I was thinking a few weeks ago that Old Dominion was probably Marshall's, easiest opponent, for the foreseeable future. Well, I think FIU is probably not even as good as Old Dominion. So, I think Marshall should be able to win this game handily, but Marshall should have done a lot of things differently this year. So you can't automatically assume it's going to be a blowout. But I mean, Marshall's the far and ahead, clear as day, better football team here. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Especially, now they have coming off a bye week, should be a little more rested, a little more focused. Hopefully, they played a really good game against North Texas, who put up a very good fight against Liberty yesterday. Although they did end up losing that game, but North Texas put up a good game against Liberty. So Marshall has been playing better as of late. Hopefully, that trend continues. FIU, good Lord bless them. I don't know where they're going to end up. They might have to start a new rivalry with Tarleton State at this point. I don't know what's going to happen to FIU.
Well, you talk about how they had it going, a couple of years ago, and it looked like it was going in the right direction. And I think back to that, and I think, it took them so many years. We talked about them. Is this year they get over the hump? Can they finally get over the hump? And then they did well, and now it's come crashing back down. So it seems to me like they built for one good season and then couldn't get it done. And now they're back kind of at zero again, or close to it. I mean, you're 1-6, you're pretty close to the bottom. But I guess if you're an FIU fan, if you can get through this week at Marshall, you do have Old Dominion coming the next week. So a battle of 1-6 teams currently could be, 1-7 when that game rolls around. But hearing you say some of those things about how, Marshall did okay and won the game against Old Dominion, they didn't really light it up. They looked terrible on offense in that game, then came right out the next week and looked really crisp and sharp against North Texas on offense. And I'm wondering if this maybe is a game to where Marshall doesn't necessarily come in and light up the scoreboard, because maybe they just try to work on some things and see if they can solidify what they can do to start running the gauntlet in November. So it wouldn't make me upset if Marshall gets this win, but it's like a 10-point win, because they maybe are doing some things that they otherwise wouldn't normally be doing. It worked. Some things worked against North Texas that we had been hoping that the Herd would try, and, stop chucking it deep on 3rd and 4 and all that kind of stuff. So maybe they try to work on a few things and see if they can just solidify the offensive identity a little bit moving forward past this game. But if you're FIU, man, you cannot like the idea of coming into Jones C. Edwards Stadium and playing Marshall this week, especially based on what the Herd just did to North Texas offensively. Now, granted, we touched on this before. North Texas could not get out of their own way. A lot of penalties, a lot of penalty yards, but still, Marshall can score. And if you look at the stats, FIU gives up a lot of points. And they were right in line with their season average, giving up 34 to Western Kentucky. They normally give up a tick more than that. But like I said, the Toppers could have had 50 if it was working. Earlier in the game, some things just didn't work for the Tops. They weren't connecting. They looked out of sorts for a little while. So let's talk about some players to look out for anyway for FIU, just in case they, put it all together for 60 minutes and become this, what the heck is this team kind of thing for, a week. Number 12, quarterback Max Borton Schlager, the 6'3", 205-pound senior, 109 out of 206 on the season, 2,026 yards, pretty good touchdown to interception ratio, 15 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions, but he's been sacked 21 times. Number 24, running back Devontae Price. He's a pretty good one. 6'2", 215-pound senior, 110 carries on the year, 587 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground. That's good for 5.3 yards per carry. And then a couple of wide receivers will spotlight. Number 0, wide receiver Tyrese Chambers, 6'1", 185-pound sophomore, 24 catches, 713 yards, leads the team for the Panthers. 6 touchdowns, also leads the team for the Panthers. Dig this, though, 29.7 yards per catch average. What? We're halfway through the season. This dude's averaging almost 30 yards a catch. Number 2, wide receiver Bryce Singleton, 5'11", 193-pound junior. 29 catches is the team lead for the Panthers. 522 yards, just 1 touchdown, but good for 18 yards per reception. I mean, dang, that's 2 pretty good averages there for their top 2 wideouts. And one note, I didn't write down their 3rd leading receiver, but I did notice that all 3 of those top 3 guys had a long touchdown pass of at least 75 yards. So they're pretty good at getting these chunk plays. I guess, if they can draw one up to strike, they're pretty good at that. We saw it happen last night against Western Kentucky as well. They had a really long pass play for a touchdown. All in all, this FIU offense is averaging 413 yards per game, way more pass heavy than they are run heavy. So if you're a Marshall fan, you kind of like to see that. Marshall's been struggling a little bit on the ground defense. FIU 310 yards through the air, 103 yards per game on the ground, and they're scoring 26.6 points per game. 19 against Western Kentucky just last night, though, so take that for what it's worth. But Marshall on the season is only allowing 22.6 points per game. So a little bit of strength on strength, I guess. Marshall's pass defense has been better than their run defense lately, and FIU seems to pass the ball a lot better than they run the ball. Defensively for FIU, number 3, defensive back Richard Dames, a 5'11", 185-pound senior. 50 total tackles, 33 of those solo. Number 7, defensive back Josh Valentine Turner, 6', 188-pound junior. 40 total tackles, 32 of those solo, and 2 passes defended. Number 10, linebacker Daniel Jackson, 6'2", 228-pound senior. 36 total tackles, 21 of those solo, 2 sacks, and a pass defended. And then number 22, defensive back Benny McCrae, 6'2", 185-pound junior, 35 tackles, 19 of those solo. Trace, let me ask you a question before I get into this extra line of stats. Do you hear something in the background that sounds like snoring? Because if you do, that's my freaking dog, as loud as hell, snoring underneath the table. She sounds like a piglet underneath the table. She is so loud. Impact plays for the Panthers. Only 12 team sacks through the half of the season. 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries. This is not an impact play type defense. So you got to like that if you're a Herd fan. 489 total yards allowed per game. 305 through the air, 184 on the ground, allowing 36.4 points per game, and Marshall scoring 36.9. This is like what Marshall likes to do offensively. They're good at versus what FIU is not good at. It's like strength on weakness here. This could be a big time thing if Marshall wants to try that. But like I said, I kind of feel like maybe they want to work on some things and sharpen some things up. So Trace, based on these stats, I mean, what's your gut feeling about this game? I know you probably think, well, Marshall's got a fairly easy chance to win. Power Index backs you up on that. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you would think Marshall's got the clear decided advantage here, obviously being at home and just being a better team. I mean, that pretty much goes without saying after going through all those numbers. But, yeah, one of my keys to victory, and you said it, is essentially strength versus weakness because, Marshall's putting up 352 yards a game through the air. FIU's allowing 305 yards per game through the air. So I would like to see Grant Wells absolutely light it up. I mean, I'd like to see him build on the game he had against North Texas, where he was excellent most of the game. I'd like to see him build upon that, and not digress down to 2 interceptions and 200 yards, and or whatever the case may be. Not don't fall off of what you were last week against North Texas. I mean, I'd like to see him build upon that. I mean, if he could throw 400 yards in this game, that would be awesome. I think it's more than doable, to be honest. I think he could have a huge game. hard to expect him to have 18 completions in a row again, but I don't think it's going to be needed in this one. But so I think that is probably, from Marshall's perspective, you got to think that they will be able to really have a lot of success through the air. I mean, I'm not saying that Rasheen Ali can't run for a lot of yards in this one too, because he absolutely can, but it seems like they should be able to really do some things through the air in this one.
Yeah, you're right. I would like to see a continuation of growth of what we saw against North Texas, because that was a really nice all-around effort. But I will say this, for all the yards and stuff that Bailey Zappi, Western Kentucky quarterback, is piling up, and I hate to say this is a down game for him, but, we're used to seeing him put up at least 400 yards a game, or really damn close to it. And, of course, he puts up 368 yards against the Panthers last night, and that's not a down game, but I would have expected him to, be pushing more of that 500-yard mark that he's done several times already. It just didn't work out that way. But still, Wells has to continue the upward trend from North Texas. We can't see it come crashing down, because you don't want to see this roller coaster type thing. And another thing to add to that, Marshall with the bye week, that also correlates with getting maybe some guys back, getting everybody a little bit healthier. So you really don't have that much of an excuse to not be at full power. I mean, not everybody's going to be healthy yet. I mean, Talik Keaton's still not going to be back for the herd, but those guys that are just dinged up should be pretty healthy and ready to go, be full speed. Let me ask you this, though. What do you think Marshall's got to do to secure, supplant, whatever, a win in this game? What are your keys to victory for the herd?
Well, the first thing I wrote down, and, I don't think this isn't me saying that they have to do this in order to win. This is me saying they need to just freaking do this. 0 turnovers. I mean, they don't. They can win this game if they have a turnover or two. I really believe that. They've proven that this year, that they're capable of doing that. But I need to see this team have a game where they have 0 turnovers, because out of 7 games they played this year, they've only had 0 turnovers one time. And that's just not a very good recipe for success. It's not a stretch at all to say that if Marshall protected the football better, they'd be undefeated right now. It's not a stretch at all, because I truly believe they would be 7-0 if they protected the football better. But they haven't, and they're 4-3. So that's the reality. But I think they need to set an example here. They need to set a trend moving forward that they're going to start playing cleaner football, and they're not going to throw interceptions left and right like Grant Wells has done all year. 10 touchdowns, 10 picks. That's not, that's the first 7 games. From now on, from this point on, you'd like to see it maybe 15 touchdowns and 5 picks or less. I mean, you want to see him really bounce back from that. And then, you don't want to keep seeing the ball coughed up on the ground. So they need to start a trend here that they're going to protect the football. So 0 turnovers, I'm hoping, in this one. Next point is, and it's one that I said earlier, strength versus weakness. I mean, FIU really struggles against the pass. Marshall excels through the air, essentially. So I think that's where Marshall can make a lot of hay in this game. And I'd like to see Grant Wells, like we both said, progress and continue to improve upon that North Texas performance, because he was very good in that game. I'd like to see him even better in this one. And I think he's capable of doing it, but he's got to play. He's got to play smart, protect the football, that kind of thing. So strength versus weakness, take advantage of that. The next point is, and I think this will have a little, you always have to think about this, and that's shake off the bye week rust, because like that exists. I think bye weeks are much more beneficial than they are not. They help players get healthy. You get more time to prepare and get focused and stuff. But then you got to think, if you haven't played in 2 weeks, you might come out a little rusty, and that's kind of how. I mean, not to the same level, but it's kind of how Western Kentucky played yesterday. Most of the first half, it was a close game, didn't play very good, looked kind of rusty. That very well could happen again. That could happen for Marshall in this game. So I think you got to shake that off. You got to, you just got to come out and show them you're just a way better team than what FIU's putting out on the football field. Don't even let them hang around. Just come out, shake off the rust. don't even let the rust affect you at all. That's really what it comes down to. So that's a good one there, I think. And the last point is, I think the defense just needs to swarm. That's really what I think. FIU seems like they have a decent amount on offense, based on the numbers and the stats and stuff that you were reading off earlier, but it really hasn't translated on the scoreboard much. But I think Marshall needs to swarm defensively. I mean, gang tackling, on the ground. Hopefully they can shut them down on the ground. They've really struggled with that this year. FIU's not a big run team. Maybe force 2 or 3 turnovers, that type of a thing. But I think that if the defense can do their job well, then Marshall can cruise in this game. So swarming defense in this one.
All good points. And I will point out that Western Kentucky, a team that, we thought would do a much better job throughout the season, coming into the season in the preseason breakdowns and all that stuff. We talked about how they should be living in the backfield. And last night that finally came to fruition for them. I think they had 7 team sacks, which is, of course, a season high for the Toppers and something we'd hoped to have seen, several times to this point. But last night it really exposed the FIU offensive line and their inability to consistently provide protection to their quarterback. So Marshall's got a pretty formidable defensive line and stable of linebackers as well. And you'd like to think if you can see Western Kentucky do these things and have this success, that Marshall should be able to at least mirror some of that. It's kind of hard to say, oh, yeah, well, the Herd can go out and get 7 sacks as well. But we've seen them do that in a game. Yeah. I'm not saying that they will, obviously, but, it's just one of those interesting dynamics that exists and stands to be exploited. Maybe Marshall can do that. But look, my number one point key to victory for the Herd on offense is just do what you do, because FIU obviously is not built or having success in the way to stop what Marshall's good at. Marshall passes the ball really well. FIU gives up a lot of passing yards. Marshall runs the ball really well. FIU's a little bit more stingy in the run defense game, but they haven't faced Rasheen Ali every week, So there stands to be a little bit of a separation there in, potentially what an FIU defense can do versus what a Rasheen Ali and this Herd offensive line can do. Number 2, don't force anything on offense. There's no need to be chucking 8 or 9 balls deep. If it's open, yeah, take it. But there's no need, I don't think, to force anything. It seems like we saw Marshall, if they run an offense, just like they did at North Texas, they have success. They move the ball. They put points up on the board. So why force anything? Why try to do this exotic, sexy stuff when it's often low percentage success rates, especially this year with this team? They hit some, but they also miss quite a few. So run an offense, see what you can get, and maybe when you're done, you just pile up about 500-600 yards of offense, and you look up on the board and you've got 45 or 50 points at the end of the day. Number 3, we'll start talk defense now. My last 2 points are on defense. Eliminate those gash plays on defense. That's really been the bugaboo for the Herd. They'll play pretty strong defense. They'll give up a play here or there, and then bam, out of nowhere, it's a 50-yard touchdown that gets busted loose, or a 75-yard touchdown run that breaks through the line and is just gone. So if those get eliminated, Marshall plays pretty stingy defense. It's just they just get exposed once or twice, 3 times a game for either a huge gainer or one that just doesn't get tackled and goes into the end zone. Number 4, no extra chances. All right, we talked about being not turning the ball over. Along with that is make sure you're playing disciplined football. No after the play, 15-yard to extend a drive penalties, none of that kind of stuff. Don't give FIU any chances. If you got a chance to get off the field, get off the field, right? Do your celebrating after your offense has the ball. No big deal, right? I'm totally in favor and will continue to be in favor of these guys celebrating when they have and make a big play, but you can't do it to the extent to where it's a detriment of your team. And we're seeing more and more the movement of these referees being quick to throw the flag on really minimal stuff. I mean, like take, for example, yesterday, I don't know if you saw the Oklahoma State and Iowa State game. I was watching it at that point where Iowa State receiver was flagged for like unsportsmanlike conduct going into the end zone, and there was nothing there. It was horrifically bad call. But if that's what these officials are taught to do, then that's what they're supposed to do. So it looks like it's just becoming easier to be flagged for any type of celebration. So, be a little bit smarter, no extra chances. Trace, who's your 200 proof player this week for the Herd?
I'm rolling with Willie Johnson in this one. I don't think I've picked him all year. I don't know if I've picked him ever for 200 proof player. If I have, it's not been very many times, put it that way. But I think he's been Marshall's best, deep threat target this year. I think he seems to come up big in that aspect. More, he seems like he's the only guy that you see get deep balls relatively consistently. I mean, I'm not saying it's like 4 or 5 times a game, but like he's the only guy that immediately comes to mind that you think, oh yeah, I remember multiple 30, 40, 50-yard plays to him. I mean, he's the one that had that 52-yarder that extended the Old Dominion game into overtime. So, I mean, he's came up big. He had a big one against App State. He seems like he's always manages to break loose, down the field, and it's no surprise. He's a super fast, athletic guy, and I don't think FIU is going to have anybody that can really slow him down in this one. So I'd like to see Willie Johnson have a big game, maybe 150 yards receiving or something. That would be awesome. So I'm going to roll with Willie Johnson as my 200 proof player in this one.
That's a good pick. I can't really recall if any of us have ever picked Willie Johnson as their 200 proof player. And you're right. He's been that guy. He's really risen to the occasion in the absence of Talik Keaton being that reliable deep threat. And, they have hit on a few to him, but they've thrown to him quite a few more times, and it just hasn't hit. So Willie not leading the team, third on the team in receiving, 18 catches, 341 yards, tied for the team lead with 2 touchdowns. So he's having a pretty solid season. And of those top, 4, 5, 6, 7 receivers on Marshall's team, he's leading, in the per reception average at nearly 19 yards. So he's having a great year. But 341 yards on the season, getting 150 sure would be a monumental task. Like 50% of your production comes in a game. Could it happen? Yeah, because it's only 2 or 3 big receptions away from 150 yards. That's just the way the game goes. For me, I'm just going to stick blanket coverage with Grant Wells to see if he can continue to build upon the excellent game, the record-setting game really against North Texas. He's doing a great job of spreading the ball around. As the receiving stats indicate for Marshall, there's not one guy who's just above and beyond, garnering all the receptions and all the yardage and all the touchdowns. They're spreading it around to everybody, and he's doing a really good job of doing it. One thing I will say, though, Trace, is this the game where Corey Gamage finally gets into the end zone? Again, no touchdowns on the season. That is an amazing stat. Leading the team in receptions and yards, but still doesn't have a touchdown reception. Amazing. What's your score prediction for the Herd and FIU?
Yeah, I'm going to say Marshall 38-17. They get the win here. I kind of nothing like not quite the North Texas game as far as just a complete washout, blowout win, but like still a very comfortable win. I feel like. I mean, and Marshall's at home here off a bye week. Hopefully a couple guys come back if they've been out recently. Hopefully they're more focused, more prepared mentally, physically, et cetera, et cetera. This is the time of the year where Marshall, if you're going to make a run at an East Division title, it's got to start now because, like we say, November's got 4 teams that could all win their division potentially. So, I mean, you got to come out here and take care of business in this one because, I mean, if you're 5-3 and 3-1 in the conference, you're in great shape at that point. You're right there with anybody in the conference. It's just you got to finish the year off and you got to set the standard for how you're going to play for the rest of the year. And I think they set a really good standard against North Texas. I'd like to see it continue here against FIU. So I think Marshall will win the game, should be pretty handily. Hopefully they even exceed what I'm saying, but I think 38-17 would be more than it would suffice for sure. So, I think it'd be a blowout. Should be a blowout win.
Yeah, we're recording so early. Of course, the the line on the game hasn't dropped yet, so we don't know what it's going to be. I'm kind of in line with where you're at. Give me the Herd 34-13 because I do feel like they might try to maybe do some things and solidify what they want to be on offense moving into November. And of course, there may be that little bit of doesn't come out as sharp and crisp off of the bye week type of thing that you talked about. So 34-13 to me is fair. And let's look right now, I'm looking at the standings in the Conference USA East Division. We've got a 4-way tie currently for the lead in the division. FAU, Charlotte, Marshall, and Western Kentucky are all 2-1 in conference. And Marshall's going to have to play all 3 of those teams coming in addition to UAB. I know that Western is also going to have to play FAU. They haven't played Charlotte yet. So all these teams are going to be beating up on one another, and it's going to be a wild month of November. For all that Conference USA has gotten wrong, boy, if it didn't work out this year to where their November in the Eastern Division is going to be potentially right down to the final week of the season for more than one team. All these teams at the top of the division are going to be playing one another in the month of November. So I think both of us like the Herd to get this one in the win column and, hopefully have a nice little 2-game winning streak leading into November. So let's talk about final thoughts, Trace. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good chance for Marshall to really impress some people again here. They did a really great job against North Texas on the road on a Friday night, national TV caliber game, and they played really well. And I'd like to see that continue in this one. Like I said, you have to set the standard, set the trend, the precedent for how you're going to play in November. And, if you come out here and you kind of struggle and, maybe squeak out a win or, of course, if you lose, that's not going to look good. And then, you got to have, especially because you got to go on the road the next week at FAU. And, they're one of the better teams in the division as well. So you got to come out here and really leave no doubt that you're a team to pay attention to in the month of November when this East Division race is going to come down to the wire. So there's a lot riding on this game, but I think Marshall should be able to take advantage of it. And I know I mentioned this to you earlier before we started recording that this whole conference realignment talk right now has been absolutely nuts, extremely captivating stuff. We don't know where everybody's going to end up. We just know there's 6 Conference USA teams that's going to the American, questionable to say the least, but it is what it is. And then as far as Marshall goes, a lot of chatter, a lot of talk about the Sun Belt, and it seems like that might be where they're headed. That would be really good, I think. I think that's the best place they could end up at this moment because Conference USA is a sinking ship, it appears. I mean, it just does not look good for this conference moving forward. We all know what the American is doing. They're just after the markets, the location. That's exactly what Conference USA did. And it essentially accomplished nothing for them to do so. So I don't really think it's going to pay off much better for the American. The Sun Belt appears to be more after established programs with solid fan bases. It's a novel concept, I know, but it seems like that's what the Sun Belt's after. I think that'll be good, especially that East Division potential. Well, I don't know if it'd be the East Division or whatever you would call it of the Sun Belt. If they add Marshall, Southern Miss, James Madison, and Old Dominion could look pretty solid. It could look really solid. And the Sun Belt, I think, for the foreseeable future would be a much better football conference than the American, especially if the American loses Memphis or SMU or, whoever remaining holdovers that they have, which they could still easily lose those teams. So it's a very, very interesting time, with stuff coming out about Marshall making an announcement on Thursday this coming week about the president and the, whatever. So I think that there's a lot. This is probably the biggest time for college athletics in many years as far as an overall landscape, and Marshall's part of it again. They haven't had to change conferences in a long time, so it looks like that's where we're headed. So ought to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. But I think I speak for most of the fan base when I say it's got to be the Sun Belt. You cannot stay in Conference USA if you're in there with McNeese State and Tarleton State, and you can't stay in the Conference USA like that.
let me make that before I get into my thoughts on that. I saw a tweet yesterday about Tarleton State from their official account. And they were pushing for an attendance record yesterday. I don't know if you saw this at their football game. They wanted to achieve 15,000 at a football game for the first time ever, I think. And they set an attendance record yesterday with just a tick over 16,000. Look, man, that is enough. That is enough to tell you, whoa, this is not where you want to be. If your all-time record is just a tick over 16,000, that's not the business you want to be in. That's not a fan base. That's not the support just isn't there. So that's scary. I didn't know much about I didn't know anything about Tarleton State other than it was an actual school, and then I saw something, but you never know. You're like, oh, well, maybe they, this little kind of niche program that has a ton of fan support and I just have no clue about it, and then you see something like that yesterday and you're like, all right, pump the brakes. This is bad. This is bad. If that's, where, if this is a potential fill in, whatever you want to call it, team for Conference USA, it's scary. It's a scary thought. You were talking about the Sun Belt and potentially being a landing spot for the Herd. And of course, it's been reported that Old Dominion is in that mix. James Madison's in that mix, and Southern Miss has already been extended an invite and apparently accepted it. So they're gone. But I want to talk about that division you talked about. I had seen that, if these 4 teams that have been rumored actually make the transition and go to the Sun Belt from wherever they are, Conference USA or whatever the heck, James Madison Colonial or something like that, that the restructuring of the Sun Belt would most likely be, of course, Southern Miss going to the Western Division, Troy moving from the Eastern Division to the Western Division, and all the Conference USA teams and James Madison going into the East, which would make the Sun Belt East a vaunted football conference. Listen to the Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina, Georgia State, Georgia Southern, James Madison, Marshall, and Old Dominion. What a lineup for an Eastern Division. Would the West ever win a title in that scenario? I don't know. But anyway, that's pretty wild. If you guys didn't know, it's already over and done with now. But the other night I hosted a Twitter Spaces, I don't know what you call it, event or whatever. And we had a lot of folks in there and we were talking about realignment, and it was a really fun, cool medium, something we'll try to do more and more. The only thing with that is I had some folks say, hey, can we go back and listen to that conversation? And no, that's not how Spaces works. It's a real-time audio conversation that runs right through the Twitter app. So there's no recording of it or anything like that. You just kind of have to be there to hear what's going on. But it was really cool. And we'll probably look to do more of that stuff. It's not something you could do all the time because, folks they have their own schedules and, but it was really fun. And we had a lot of interesting conversation. And a lot of that conversation was kind of around, well, what do you do if you're in the Conference USA and you don't have an outlet right now? Like, what's the answer? What does Western Kentucky do? How are they feeling? Like, what are their options? All that kind of stuff. So we had a lot of really good conversation, but look for, once some of this news starts to break again and we see actually who goes to the conference or who stays in Conference USA, who's going to the Sun Belt, if anybody, and all that kind of stuff, we'll probably do it again and have some more discussion. But right now, it looks like if there's a lifeline, a life raft thrown to you, I don't know how you don't take it because it's pretty bleak being in Conference USA right now. And for those folks that, are like, hey, there's no need to panic and, change is not always a good thing. I get that. I understand that. But if you're one of those 5 teams that ends up remaining in Conference USA, whoever those 5 teams are, you've got to be petrified. You've got to be. I mean, who do you fill in your conference with? You've got to have 10 teams to play, football. You've got to have, I don't know how many to play basketball and keep, you just don't want to lose your auto bid status and all that kind of stuff. That's got to be like goal 1. Who can we get to where we can get this conference rounded out and keep our auto bid to the tournament and, maybe find enough quality teams to field a decent football conference. But if if you've got a way out, I think you have to take it. I don't know. Obviously we don't want to see Western and Marshall stop playing every year. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun running this account and doing this podcast and all that kind of stuff. But on the same token, if Marshall's like, nah, we're not going, and they go, all right, Western, how about you? Western's going to be like, yeah, we're out. Thanks, Herd. Yeah. So it's not one of those where we're pulling for Marshall over Western. It's just like, if you've got the way out of this sinking ship, you better take it. And if you turn it down, you're going to let somebody else off the sinking ship.
If you have a chance to go to the Sun Belt and you willingly stay in Conference USA FCS version, then you should be fired immediately from whatever job you have, period.
And we've seen things, a lot of the fans are like, why are you taking so long? What the hell is the holdup? This is a no-brainer decision. Why are you saying, we'll just take our time? And I would like to think that the decision makers at Marshall have already talked with whoever they need to talk with. They know what they're going to do. And they've at least, like, if the move is to go to the Sun Belt, they've at least talked to the Sun Belt HQ and said, hey guys, we need some time to make this, look like we're doing it in the right time frame. We want to get our president hired. We want to make it look like they had some real input, even though they already know who's got the job. They've already obviously had these conversations, right? I mean, it's not like you're going to hire somebody Thursday and then be like, so what do you think about staying in the Conference USA? Obviously, these things have already been discussed, right. But they have to make it look, it's just got to have an appearance. So whatever. I did see somebody, I can't remember who it was on my timeline, that had actually a pretty thought out way of things that might go. I mean, I can't say that this could be, he said, well, they already know what they'll do. The Sun Belt will probably announce it on Monday or Tuesday. Marshall will announce its president on Thursday. And then at the game, they might make an official announcement.
That will be cool.
I was like, what? Well, hell, that's actually a really good idea. Yeah. That's a great way to get some excitement in right at the middle of a football game or whatever. That would be pretty awesome. But you just got to think that they're not stringing along. This MU brass isn't stringing along the Sun Belt, thinking that they'll just hold on forever. There's probably a lot of excitement, and it's not just from Conference USA teams. Maybe there's probably other teams that would like to get into the Sun Belt there. You never know. So anyway, interesting times ahead for sure. A lot of change is going to be on the horizon in 2023. And I want to touch on those teams that that we all know are going to the AAC. Good for them. I mean, good for them. They're out there. If they think that's the best move, cool. We all thought it was going to be 2, and we thought for sure that UAB was going to be a lock, and they were. A few things that I will note with the other teams that they decided to pick. It's quite obvious, like you said, they went after markets and cities and things like that. Also, to that end, I think they absolutely tried to box in the Mountain West from being able to expand into Texas at a later time. So they took all these Texas teams and they were like, now what are you going to do? So that was probably part of it. But now, if you're a Marshall fan, like I know you are you even soured at the fact that you didn't get that AAC invite? Thinking about who else was left? I mean, you wanted out of the Texas business. You're basically out of the Texas business. You've got UTEP still hanging on out there for the time being. And if you do go to the Sun Belt, you're going to have Texas State to deal with. But other than that, that's it. That's kind of it.
Yeah.
So good for those teams. But if you're a Herd fan, are you really upset about it now? No, I don't think you are. Now, if you get if on the flip side, if the Americans hey, we're going to go ahead and take UAB and FAU, and we're going to take Charlotte and Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky and Southern Miss and all these teams that you kind of like playing with, and you're left with everybody in Texas and you're probably a little upset about that. But
yeah,
I'm kind of glad if they were going to take 6, they took a bulk of them in Texas. I mean, I wish nothing but happiness for those guys.
And whether it's the American, whatever version it's going to look like, or the Sun Belt, Marshall's still going to have to travel anyway, pretty far anyway. So it doesn't really for that note, it doesn't matter because, I mean, the Sun Belt is still pretty far, pretty spaced out, and so is Conference USA. So like that's just like a push. It doesn't even that part's irrelevant to me. But I mean, the Sun Belt is going to have obviously better football programs. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the 6 teams that they added in the American have next to no football history or success, sustained success. I mean, that's not taking a shot. That's just the truth. I mean, there's just not much there. And, they're only after, like we said, markets. And but the thing is that, what big deal if you get these markets and, if you get these schools that are in these major TV market areas, who cares if you're in a big market, if nobody watches you? I mean, it's not like they're, North Texas or Rice or whoever's in the Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth market. You think anybody in those markets cares about Rice or North Texas? Heck no. I mean,
very few people in that Houston market even care about Houston.
Exactly. I mean, it's not a criticism. That's just a fact. I mean, It's not like you're Oklahoma or Texas A&M or whatever. That's not it. I mean, kudos to those teams for getting, a better landing spot, but whether they deserve it or not is a totally different scenario, and we could do a totally different podcast on that subject. But
we probably will at some point.
We probably will.
But look, let's think about this. 5 years from now, 6 years from now. So, because we can talk about these moves by Conference USA 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what happened? Conference USA at that time, 6 years ago, was seen as a more high-profile conference than the Sun Belt. Now Conference USA is on freaking life support.
Now we're on Facebook.
Yeah, but I mean, the conference is on the cusp of life support because 6 teams just left. 3 more are rumored to be gone. 1 already is gone. So you've lost 7 teams essentially this week.
Yeah.
With 2 more on the horizon. And now Conference USA seems to be like it's about to get delivered the death blow. The Sun Belt has overtaken them because they chose to take programs that with a winning tradition that are committed to the on the field product and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Appalachian State sold out a Wednesday night game.
Yeah.
Wednesday. And there were 16 fans in the stands against when Marshall played North Texas on a Friday night.
Yeah. UAB's, their brand new stadium. There was 2,000 people there.
Right.
I'm like,
I know some of this may come off as sour grapes, like, oh, Western didn't get picked to go to the America. Marshall didn't get picked to go. It's not sour grapes, guys. It's really not.
I mean,
these are legitimate points.
Yes.
Somebody brought up in the discussion the other night, like, well, the American, one of these teams that have had a commitment to their facilities and yada, yada. I'm like, who cares? Like, if you build a 50,000 seat stadium, but you can't get 10,000 fans to a game, who cares?
You think Marshall hasn't put effort into the facilities and stuff? But
I mean, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's great. So you showed you're willing to spend a little bit of money, but if nobody comes to watch your games, who is that for? And they say, well, it's for, recruits and this, that, and the other. Great. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to go out and play in front of an empty stadium. All the weight rooms and all that player lounges and all that stuff in the world doesn't change the fact that nobody's coming to the games. And, in the Sun Belt, at least currently, some of these teams anyway have really passionate fan bases that show up to watch them on a Wednesday night. So, I don't know what the right answer is. All I know is if you're a current Conference USA member, of which there are still 7, and you have a way out, I can't imagine a scenario to where you think, now we're going to stay. We're going to stay. Because if Marshall says, we're going to stay, and they're like, well, okay, that's kind of really only who we wanted out of Conference USA. And then the Sun Belt says, let's just talk from an athletic standpoint, not any other things. Because Liberty's got this cloud hanging over them that nobody wants to be in a conference with them. I'm just saying. And they say, well, Marshall doesn't want to come. All right, we really don't want Old Dominion, really. We'll still invite James Madison. We think they'll be competitive, and it'll be pretty awesome. Now, what if they say, all right, well, let's just take Liberty instead? And now you got Old Dominion and Marshall still in the Conference USA. That makes it a much better conference than it was than if they go. You might be able to attract somebody, but who the hell is there to attract? There's no one. No one. McNeese State? Come on, man. Tarleton State? Come on. Southeast Missouri? No. You can't do that.
If Marshall, like I said earlier, about them willingly wanting to stay in the conference, which I don't think that's the case, but if they willingly want to stay in Conference USA, that to me says they're content with being a big fish in the littlest pond imaginable. That's what that says to me. Like, they don't want to actually compete. They just want to dominate a really, really weak conference.
But they still haven't been dominating this fairly weak Conference USA.
No,
that argument flies right out the window. And you talk about like basketball, right? If you go to the Sun Belt, I don't know who won the Sun Belt last year, but I'd like to think that right out of the gate, if Old Dominion and Marshall go to the Sun Belt, they'd have to be two of the best teams in the conference. Have to be. And, I made the point like, well, maybe some of this stuff is getting slowed down because of soccer. And I was schooled to the fact that, Coastal Carolina plays soccer in Conference USA because, well, the Sun Belt doesn't host it. But if Old Dominion and Marshall and a couple of teams go, then some of these other teams that play Conference USA soccer would probably have to go to the Sun Belt as associate members like University of Kentucky and so on and so forth, so they could sponsor soccer again. That's really kind of a moot point. So I don't know. I don't understand the posturing unless they're doing it just to, like, out of what they could perceive as a sign of respect for an incoming university president. Like, right. we don't want to announce this monumental decision before we hire our university president as a showing of respect type thing. I get that. I really do. But why wait till Thursday? I mean, if it's that damn important, like, shouldn't they like charter a flight to Huntington and have that announcement of a university president today? And then, whatever announcement you're going to make should be tomorrow,
and
not Thursday.
Page of the Sun Belt on that. You would think they would have to be, but
you would hope so. The arrogance, if you don't, arrogance involved, if you're just like, yeah, we're not going to tell them anything. We're just going to do what we want to do. That would not be well received. So I would like to think that is not what's happening. Everybody has to be on the same page. They have to know. These decision makers have to know what's going on. They have to. Otherwise, I feel like reports would already be swirling. That's like, well, Marshall's saying no. And you know how the media is. You can't hide anything from them. They can find it all out.
Yep.
So the story would just already be like, well, Marshall's bucking this opportunity, but you're not seeing any of that. So whatever. This turned into a nice 15-minute spiel at the end of the podcast, didn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody loves realignment talk. Jiminy Christmas. We'll definitely do another one when news breaks. I'll do a Twitter Spaces for that, so Herd fans can come on and actually any fans, really anybody can come on and talk about what they love about the decision or hate about the decision or whatever. That was just a really fun medium, and I'd like to continue to do that. So,
and now Trace, it's not talk; it's reality now.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the reaction, the realness, the opinion, the thought processes that these people were bringing to that session was awesome. It's things we don't look at things from a Louisiana viewpoint. We don't look at things from a Southern Miss viewpoint. We look at things from a Western Kentucky and Marshall viewpoint. And it's nice to hear what other people are thinking, or just other, Herd or Tops fans that have a different way of thinking about what they feel is good or bad versus what you do. It was just really fun, and I want to continue to do that more. Anyway, Trace, let's get out of here this week. We're closing in on an hour. Freaking previews usually take like 20 minutes, but that is the life with realignment on the cusp. So take us out of here, and we'll get out of here this week.
Go Herds.
Go Tops is the Moonshine Throwdown podcast for the foreseeable future. We'll see you later.